This is F.D.Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, my name is Frank. I am your host, and this is F.D. Recovery. Today I have a guest host with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Gary Hines, sometimes better known as Claude Headgate, the TV and radio personality.
Well, welcome to our FD family, FD Recovery. And this portion of the podcast is our weekly intention. So basically, for anybody that's jumping in and listening for the first time, basically we go week to week and we pick a spiritual principle and put it forward throughout the week and see how it fares out for us. So last week was gratitude. I know you weren't with us on the last one, but we'd like to do a recap from last week. But this week is going to be patience. But before we dive into that, let's jump into gratitude and see how it worked. So Claude Headgate, I was going to call you Claude. So Gary, how did gratitude work for you this week?
I didn't know anything about gratitude this week. Being an objective, I found myself being grateful many times this week for especially little things. As you get along in life, you start to figure out what's important, and some of the things that I feel the Lord helps me with on a daily basis, just little things that might be frustrating to me, and all of a sudden they're figured out or whatever. I'm grateful and try to notice each and every one of those things as they happen.
Yeah, I could relate to that. I wish, week to week I would choose these spiritual principles, stuff like acceptance and gratitude, and this week will be patience, but I do it and I'm like, damn, I'm not good at this. Because the gratitude piece, I was like, I noticed how out of gratitude I was at times and how selfish I can be. I'm not running around being a horrible person, but I realize how much times I have to check myself throughout the day, especially, I mean, let's be honest, I work in customer service, it's super.
Dealing with the public.
Oh, yeah.
Can be very trying.
Yes, but one thing that I did do is do little pit stops, and do mental checklist of my gratitude and things that I like to call them little pit stops, throughout the day, because the little rest areas almost get very similar to how it does on a highway, but that's how I relate it, is just stop it and taking a moment and just kind of catching my breath and, just doing a mental checklist of all the things that I know that are important to me. And because sometimes when I get ahead of myself, especially in this fast-paced life, I can get I'll forget, right? The things that my wife does all the time for me, and then I start expecting it, and I just get in that ungrateful and almost entitled kind of way. And I felt myself with these pit stops throughout that time. It's like when I was feeling that way, or I see that I was just a little out of alignment and I wasn't connected to my higher power. That's definitely those times where I had to do a little pit stop.
Speaking of pit stops, I did use underarm deodorant before I came over.
Well, that's good news, yeah, because you smell fresh and clean. Speaking of, I probably could use some. And I wanted to highlight how hard it was for me this week for people that are listening because they tuned in last week and I was, had all these grand plans of gratitude and but it was really difficult, right? One thing I realize is when I'm not connected to God and when I'm not connected to the whole higher power and spirituality piece, I find myself a little more irritated, a little less lovable, and I just realized how hard it was, and most of that stuff is for my own doing because I know I know what's good for me. You can't. I would like to relate it to like my phone. If my battery's low, I know I have to plug into a higher power, a higher source, and into that source of power, and then those little pit stops, those mental checklists help me get back to that, and those prayers and those and connecting back with that.
Well,
But
it's very much like being indwelled by the Holy Spirit, only this is something that you can actually mentally control yourself
yeah.
throughout the course of the day, which it seems to be. I'm sure it's a good practice.
Mm. Yeah, that gratitude. Because the last week we talked about. I had Shelly on here actually, and we talked about the attitude of gratitude, right? And I spoke of how it's easier to read it on a fortune cookie than actually, kind of execute this stuff in real life. And it's always easier until you put it into practice. It's easier said, right? And that's kind of what I've realized is some of this week to week stuff when I'm working this and acceptance. I realized on how much on the other end I really am. It's like
Yeah.
the gratitude and the just, I'm more aligned in selfishness than anything. And I realized going back to, even from a religious standpoint, how much the negative and devil and all those things in life can really kind of, rip at you. And yeah, I was just you just notice when you start working on these spiritual principles how much you're really out of alignment and you're going, "Oh, wow," you know.
Yeah, well, that's all part of it. The energy that comes from the negative side takes a lot of energy to fight,
Yeah.
and you don't realize it while you're fighting it. When you're doing things like your pit stops, you realize it
Yeah.
at that moment. But other moments, things will occur, and you'll react to them, and won't be aware that the devil made me do it. To quote Flip Wilson.
Hey man, but that's the funny part of that is there really is the contrary out there, right? As much as we're trying to connect to God, as much as we're trying to work through spiritual principles, there's an active energy and active power out there really. I don't like to be paranoid, but there is something working against it, right? And I notice with the negative self-talk, some of the places I'll go, right? Some of the entitlement I'll feel at times, and those are the things I constantly have to check myself and kind of plug back into the to God and just be like, hey, just take this from me because obviously do your will in my life because if I have the steering wheel, I'm going off way in the deep end.
Guardrail to guardrail.
Yeah, that's
And
saying it
sometimes
nicely.
over the ledge.
Yeah, I'm in the outback.
I'm testing my air brakes. I've driven over the cliff.
Oh yeah. Let's see if this thing flies. So, and one thing that I wanted to do is it's totally connected to God and higher power. And I don't mean to turn anybody off out there because I know everybody's on different spiritual walks and we're just trying to help each other out. But for me, the whole God concept and the whole higher power, when you connect into that, I realize, some of this gratitude stuff comes a little bit easier. I'm still in this flesh and still have to deal with all this human emotion and human guilt and anger, happiness, sadness. So that there's a humanistic piece about this that I have to honor as well. But you could also, you know, plug into your higher power and God, and just ask for guidance. And that was one thing that I realized I had to do during all this. There wasn't no gratitude happening for me until I checked in with God first, right? Because that's just, I found out this week is that's how it worked for me. I constantly when I The funny thing is I notice with me is when I work a certain spiritual principle, the the contrary pops up mostly, right? So if I'm working acceptance, certain situations will happen that I really don't want to accept more than as if I was working a different principle. It's just almost like there's tests out there, and if you pray for a certain thing, such like this week, will be patient. I could only imagine there's going to be assholes coming down the line because I work in customer service, and what sometimes when you pray to God, you get your prayer, and only what the definition when you jump into patience is tolerance, right? That was the thing that popped up. It's like being able to go through the ebbs and flows of life without getting upset and being tolerant. Well, sometimes when you pray for things, the answer comes, and it's not always in the shape or form that you.
My brother, the psychologist, has a client who would like to have more patience, and he wants it now.
So I think we're done with gratitude, and we'll transition into patience here. And the way I like to start off it, I would like we what we do is we read a little definition, see what the almighty Google has to say. And patience is the ability to wait calmly and endure hardship or delay without becoming angry or upset. It involves perseverance, tolerance, and acceptance, and is a valuable character trait. Well, duh. Very valuable. So, starting off with that definition, it already implies that you know you enter these situations, whether they be hardship or, and for me they don't really always have to be hardships, right? They can just be your day-to-day monotonous things. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but it implies that we probably get angry and we probably get upset. So when you introduce some patience in it, that's I think that's a funny little, because when I think of patience, I don't think of anger, right? But that's kind of how the imbalance works, right? I want to be patient, and I think it's this holy thing, but it's really just don't get mad, dude. Relax. And I have it. If you look over on the whiteboard, I have that patience written. It's getting a little smudged because it's been up there, but it was a daily principle I was working for, gosh, months, right? Because I'd find myself getting angry all the time, right? And it's something that I really tried to work. And the funny thing is, too, we had gratitude, not to backtrack, but you see up there, Gary, there's the gratitude pill bottle.
Yeah.
It says gratitude RX. Take one dose every morning, may cause shift in perspective, may cause feelings of abundance, and then decrease feelings of fear and anxiety.
Well,
So
give me some of that.
that's the good stuff. But it's this really is, working. When you get down to it, it's just like, for me, this person that's sitting right here, the thing I'm trying to constantly conquer is anger, and trying not just trying to be tolerant. Trying to work that spiritual principle of tolerance, right? And that coincides with patience big time. What's some of your dealings with patience? How has it been working in your life thus far?
Well, it's been working really good in terms of uh, I just recently split up a cord of wood, and you look at it and you think you got to split all that wood, and it feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
But as you do a little bit at a time, and go at your own pace, and uh, eventually you'll get it done. Uh, and you will experience anger and frustration and pain. and all that stuff during the process, but the mental part of it, it's like running laps or anything you do. You can either make it real hard on yourself and real tedious, or you can think about something else and just get it done.
Yeah.
And, that to me is a big part of what patience plays in my life.
Well, you know, one thing I've really mastered, and I say this with a head full of ego, I've really mastered the counterpart of patience, which is impatience. And anybody that's known me out there, especially in my using and boozing, that was a big thing. Is because if the counterpart is anger, if we're trying not to get angry or upset, right? We're trying to have tolerance. Well, boy, I was on that end most of my life, right?
Yeah.
And just until the last 6 7 years, and or trying to at least, so about 6.5 years. And man, I really mastered that whole impatience. I was so impatient constantly. I wanted it yesterday, and especially when you start dealing with drugs and alcohol, right? Feeding that itch and just that vulnerability it allows into your life of just being a ball and chain to something. It's yeah, I can say that that's one thing that I've really mastered is the impatient part of it, because I'd be a liar and say if I come in here and it's all about meditation and relax and prayer. No, that's not. This is the real world where we have real problems and we deal with real life stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that other world is pretty dark.
yeah.
No matter whether it's gambling or drugs or sex or whatever it is that has got you all out of whack.
Hmm.
We talked about the guardrails before, and it's a good idea if you can stay between them.
It's funny you brought that up, because I want to say about 9 years ago, roughly, I was in one of my I stole my buddy's truck, and we decided, or I decided, um, to fall asleep at the wheel, right, in my buddy's truck. We had a fight, and I took his truck, and it's not like I stole it, but he's like, "Don't leave, dude. You're all messed up." So I leave, and I'm on my way back from Chico, and I kept falling asleep because I was on a couple day bender of drinking and using, and this one fast forward to this clip, I just remember waking up, and I'm just on a guardrail. And I'm just waking up on a guardrail, and it's just but that's the insanity. So not only is that such a good metaphor, but it's also was a reality for me, as I was smashing into guardrails, and not even in my own vehicle, just in that just in other people's stuff, and life can get really unhinged when you're living that kind of life. You gotta That's a good analogy, because that's one thing that I've learned to do now is it's like that game of operations. You don't want to touch the sides. Bzz.
Well, thank God for the guardrails,
Oh yeah.
because in certain cases they keep us from getting really really crazy, but we can break through them too.
Yeah, that is true. And it was on 50 too, going up from like, where Placerville goes into, like, where Strawberry is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So thankfully I was going upwards, so I was towards the mountain, at least in the park, going like by Strawberry, and I woke up on a guardrail towards the mountain, thankfully. But yeah, it was. I don't recommend it. If the listeners are out there, please avoid it.
Did you continue your journey, or did you stop after that?
That was yes, I had 3 pop tires on that whole journey because I kept falling asleep at the wheel, hitting it like I spun out in Sacramento first before I got to Strawberry. I spun out in the middle of the intersection at 2 a.m. and cuz I fell asleep at the wheel. Oh gosh, I'm surprised I didn't kill anybody. Thank God I didn't.
Yeah.
Um because I mean, geez, falling asleep right at the wheel. I'm surprised I didn't do more damage to the vehicle too, because it was still drivable and just a couple cosmetics. It wasn't even that bad. The bumper wasn't even coming off or anything. I don't know how. The only thing that really got damaged was the tire. So the let's see. Let me look at this.
Back to patience.
Back to.
I got too impatient with that subject.
Yes, we did. All right, not to be. Let's see, not to be. Oh, that one's a good one. I wrote this down because this is something that I really struggle with, right? Is especially in customer service or just in life, really, but is that fake patience, is just seething in hate almost or seething in anger. And that's one thing. That's how I want to use it this week. Is I find myself less and less in those situations. Since I've been in recovery, I don't find myself too much there. But there are certain situations where you're just like, just wanting to leave the scenario, right? Because either the person's just being an asshole, or maybe I am at that moment. But that's one thing that I really want to work on this week because because when I really I'm not in a place of tolerance, and I'm not in patience, and I'm not in gratitude, because they all kind of reflect each other. I find myself a little bit more defiant. I find myself a little bit more disobedient, not fulfilling the stuff that I know I need to do, right? And I know that when I'm with a higher power, and I'm connected to that higher power, I'm less of those things. Like, I'm less defiant. When my wife, when my just because my wife says something off cuff, I'll be a little bit more inclined to say something negative back, right? But the difference between her and I've proven that I can be much worse. And my wife will say something small, right? And there I am. Oh, I gotta top this. If she's gonna do that, I gotta top it, and that's one thing that I've had a bad time with my whole life, is just getting to that point where um I can't afford to really fall back on anger, because I end up in jail, right? I end up in those places where they put handcuffs on you because you misbehave constantly. I've proven it to myself, right? And so, how can you connect with that whole that seething with hate? Have you dealt with any of that lately?
Well, I drove in here. uh, I guess one of the big triggers for me is situations and or people that I have no control over.
Mm,
If I have some control over what's going on, I can control my temper because I'm not given a reason to lose it. But if I can't control it and it still happens, that tends to put me into another frame of mind.
mm. I could relate to that. The things that just sparks something in me, because that I relate to it in a sense of, if I have understanding ahead of time, and I know where everything's going to be, and I know what the plan is, then I'm less of that. But when things start popping up unexpected, that's when like when there's an audible last second, and it's just like, okay, well, this is not what we agreed on, right? So I can definitely relate to that. So, well, that whole aspect of, like, trying to be a better person, and like, okay, even though this isn't quite what I planned on. Trying to find that sense of patience and gratitude in the moment where you're just like, okay, let's just kind of go with the flow and see if we can't dig ourselves out of this negative mindset. Because man, I can get there quick because especially when I have something planned out and I have my hopes up on things certain out a certain way. It's it's one of those ones. It's trying to work my program to where at least no matter what pops up, I could at least be adaptable. Right. That's definitely I can relate to that big time.
Well, as you practice and practice, you'll get better at it. When I first met you, the one of the most impressive things about you over the time that I've known you is what you told me when you and Shelley first asked if you could rent my apartment from me. And I asked you about being a troublemaker and all that sort of thing, and you told me flat out that you were having trouble with your temper
Hmm.
and you intended to work on it. And from that point to where you are now, just look at how far you've come.
Yeah,
And the fact that you were straight enough with me to be that honest with me really told me a lot about your inside character.
I appreciate
And
that.
yeah, that was impressive.
Well, I appreciate that. That recognition means a lot because that's one thing that because back when that was happening and she ended up we ended up in a weird scenario where I ended up having to bail out, because I got arrested. I'm pretty sure you knew that, right? I think it was right around that time. But long story short, but from that moment on, I realized I had to make a change, right? Because there I was, I didn't have the dope to blame. I didn't have the alcohol to blame. I was sober. I'm like, then all my bells and whistles went off. I'm like, wow, here I am again. And it was degrading sitting in that jail cell and nothing to blame. It was
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And but
Well, that's when all my troubles started, is when I sobered up.
mhm.
I didn't realize how screwed up my life was because I could gloss it over and get wasted and forget about it, you know.
Yeah.
But when I couldn't do that anymore, holy cow, this is screwed up.
You got to start addressing the monster under the bed, with
Yeah,
certain things in your life.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a key moment is I made a promise to myself that because her and I we got in a little shoving match and a little slapping match and just stupid stuff, right? And there I was in that same situation again and just repeating the abuse. I got abused.
yeah,
So there I was just abusing other people and I've got it down. And that was the one thing that I stayed away from was relationships. So I was killing it for these 2 years of my early recovery. Then I got into relationship. And then all these unknown things about myself, like jealousy, anger that hits on a different level. Because my buddy can piss me off. It's not the same. Your
yeah,
girlfriend pisses you off. That's a
yeah,
little different. And I know it shouldn't be. It just is. And especially when you get into those back and forth matches, and you guys are trying to hurt each other's feelings, and that's never fun. So, but from stating for what you said is that from that place on, I made a promise. I'm not gonna fucking hit anybody anymore. I'm not gonna touch anybody. And that was a big part. But from that moment on, for the last 4 years of my recovery, I haven't had an incident since literally around that time when we were talking.
yeah.
I mean, we've had a couple words here and there, but whenever I ever feel like I'm gonna go off the hinge, I just jump in my truck and drive to the gym. All right.
Yep,
All right.
that's what I've used exercise to not only get rid of those emotions, but be so tired that I didn't have the energy to muster them up. I
Yeah.
remember that well many times, just being so tired from running 3.5 miles,
Oh
and
yeah.
whatever I was doing that I didn't have the energy to get all ticked off about every little thing.
Yeah, there's some healing factors, especially to physical movement, right? God gave us this physical body. He gave us our soul, and what I truly believe is when you work those muscles out and you work your body out, which God was God given, right? I believe it connects you back to your soul. I truly believe that. Because that there's when I'm done with the workout, I feel whole again. It's like
Yeah,
there was a disconnect in my mentality that wasn't allowing my soul to connect to my body and my mind, and all those three things are just out of one's going this way, the other is going that way, and my head's in the clouds,
yeah.
and
And
um,
you recognize it as the endorphins
mhm,
that it puts out in your brain that make you feel good, but that's exactly what's going on.
yeah, yeah, because I mean it's I mean, our body lives in our mind and our mind lives in our body, and so does our spirit, right? I could
Yeah,
only think about my mind through my thoughts, right?
yeah,
I could only think about my body through my thoughts. So I could only see my body through my vision. So
yeah,
there's something to be said with it when it's all connected. When you start thinking about it differently, you start getting off task, right? And that for me, my daily stressors throughout life starts disconnecting them. I start thinking, oh, my brain is I'm so smart and I can think about everything and we'll think this problem away, and not realizing, okay, where's your spirit at? Where's your body at? Like you're not connecting those things. So whenever I put myself from strenuous like exercise, it centers me.
yeah.
Right. So basically, anybody out there listening, you're having a hard time, and you're not into working out, you need to at least get physical. Go do a hike, go do a run, go bicycle, push ups, do something, because you get that body moving and you'll get that lactic acid out of your muscle. There's so many scientific stuff you can do, but when we base it down, you connect your mind, body, and soul right back together.
Because when you get into that habit, you don't feel right unless you do that.
hmm Yeah, it's almost like your body knows a new homeostasis. It wants to find that new balance. And once you have that in your life, it knows that it's off kiltered. It's just like, whoa, I'm used to releasing these toxins, because obviously throughout the day, your body's meant to fight off toxins, fight off viruses, all these things, right? And and the way it does it is through our liver, our kidneys, all that. When you start working out, it helps with the sweat, detoxify your everything, right? So, and then it also helps your innards because you start speeding up your metabolism and everything starts working a little bit better. And yeah, I mean, you're totally right about the whole. It's just, man, if you're out there and you're in early recovery, and or even if you're in late recovery, I mean, shoot, it's important that you do all this work spiritually, but you also got to do physical too, right? You have to make sure your body's right. You have to make sure you're feeding yourself correctly and not overdoing it. That's one of those ones that I struggle with, right? Because I lift a lot of heavy weight. That's what I like doing, and I do it multiple times a day. And when you're putting that much energy out, to repair your muscles, you have to eat a lot of stuff. Like you have to eat protein and stuff like that. So finding that delicate balance for me is key, really. So is there anything else? Let's see where we're at. Yeah. All right. So throughout this week, I mean, the key things that I wanted to work on was definitely just not have that fake fabricated patience, right? And that's because I find myself in certain situations, and by fake patience, I mean I'm super nice to a person, and then when that person's leave, I turn to a coworker and I go, man, that person was an asshole, and it's just like, okay, I have no idea what they were going through. They
Yeah.
could have just lost a loved one. They could have just gone a fender bender, anything, right? And
Or they could just be an asshole, but
that is true. That is true. But one thing, like, to add on to that, they're an asshole. There's plenty out there because I know it from firsthand experience of me being an asshole, so I know they're out there. So the one thing that I've tried to work on in my recovery is, for me, I'm big on accountability, right? So when it turns into somebody, so say someone enters my reality, as soon as they leave, I'm still have faculty over my decisions, mind state, everything, right? I have the choice. Am I going to allow this person to throw me off center? And if I do allow that person to throw me off center, I've done a disservice to myself because I'm renting them space in my head and my body, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I've really worked on in my recovery is really just saying, okay, I have control over my thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Yeah, some stuff pops up that shows up that I wasn't expecting, like triggers.
Yeah.
Like triggers is if somebody talks to me a certain way or starts talking to me demeaning, it triggers me in a way from my childhood, right?
Yeah.
Some of that stuff with my father and my mother or my stepmother, and it does that real deep psychological stuff that you don't really know on surface, but it's triggering. It's like, oh, who the fuck does this guy think he's talking to, or this girl think? So those are those things that I really have to be hyper aware of, right? And really invite that back to that higher power, you know?
Yeah.
I'm constantly have to check in. That pit stop just doesn't work just only for gratitude. It's for every spiritual thing that I'm working on in my life, as I constantly have to slow down and remember to get connected and grounded with my higher power.
Yeah. Well, when you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you're able to communicate with God directly, and your prayers will be heard. Maybe not answered the way you think they should be, but they will be answered. It's those times when you're not in fellowship
Mm,
with the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit helps you make good decisions, good choices, take your pit stops, all that
yeah.
stuff. It's not only conscious, but it's also spiritual.
Mm,
And the spiritual side of it, very few of us can really understand. I have a sister-in-law that I believe has more to do with spirits and understands them than I do. And so there are people that do. I'm just not one of them, but it is a spiritual thing.
very much so, yeah. That's one thing in my recovery is digging into the spirituality, is understanding that it is a very spiritual thing. There's a lot happening um on the spirit plane and with God, and with the negative devil, however you want to put it in there. And I'm not trying to put anyone off out there, but there's a very spiritual thing, right, that's happening even as we speak, right? The way it works in my recovery is I try to, and going back to that prayer, like that, we think that our prayer is not answered, like, but it is. It's just not the way we thought. Like ours is like, I really want this chick that I know is super toxic to me, but God will come in and go, no, that's not for you. And here's the path you should be on. And the whole time I'm like, screw God. He doesn't know what's good for me.
Yeah,
I want that girl.
you didn't give me what I wanted.
and then when you start approaching God like a vending machine, it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just like, B9. Well, I want the ruffles up there, B9. But the reality is you can't. That's not the way God works. You want God's will, and that's one thing that I pray. Do your will, God. Do your will, right? Because I know if it's left up to me, I want all the stupid shit. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, sure. That's our sin nature.
yep,
We all have that, but it's definitely spiritual warfare. So if you can get on the side of positive, uh, you have to be on one side or the other.
yeah.
And the positive is the one that's going to win out in the end, I believe. And probably a pretty smart thing to do.
Well, not on top of that, to add to it, it's like it's just easier on this end. I mean, I've lived
You betcha. You betcha.
I've lived that negative lifestyle, man. I went to jail, prison, mental institutions, and I've been in. My cellie was a level 4, just career criminal, right? When I was in Tracy, and he was a good dude, but he was in that life, right? And there was a pivotal point was when my recovery, when I was just starting to really want to like be clean and like stop the dope, stop the alcohol, stop everything. And that it was when I hit Tracy's, because I was already getting towards the end of my using, and there was a spiritual thing happening, and God was trying to reach me, and it was putting people in my life with messages that I didn't quite understand at first, and it was hitting me in a certain way, and all these really influential people for that sect of that subculture, which in jail and prison is kind of its own subculture. But these people like level 4, as soon as he hit my cell, he was running the all two yards, and he was kind of a badass when in that world, right? And he had a lot of respect. And as soon as he came in there, he said, "Jump on the top bunk." I respected him because he was no joke, right? And long story short, it was just like he was just pumping me full of this information, like, "Hey man, you don't want this, right?" And like, you don't want to live this. And he was just trying to just remind me to just do better. And he gave me his number. And he said, "But if you call this number, you have a choice." He says, "If you call this number, you're not trying to change. You're going to want to go, you're wanting to go back to that life. You're wanting drugs." And so I had that number, and I remember it disappeared. I can't remember what happened to it. And I go back to, we're talking about God does things for us that we necessarily can't do for ourselves. Because I still had a couple runs in me, but if I would have been linked up with a guy like that moved serious weight and was in there for some serious crimes, right? It was it was just a matter of time. This guy, I would have been on a bad way, and I could either been dead or been behind bars right now. But that's not what God had planned for me.
Instead, you've got a wonderful wife and child and
Hmm.
job and outlook, and hallelujah.
Well, the key word today is patience, but I think it's also redemption, right? This one guy, it was during my last little run there, and God was yanking at my heartstrings and trying to get me back towards the light. And this guy stopped me out of nowhere, and I just left the library, and it was just a free place to get some Wi-Fi, right? And because I had a phone that didn't have service, but so I needed a place for Wi-Fi. Of course, I didn't have really anything to my name. My house was burnt down the street. It was just burned down in a house fire, and there I was again, just in that kind of homeless, vagrant kind of situation. And then I ran into this guy, and he stopped and showed me this book, and the title was Redemption. I don't remember who wrote it or whatever, and I just remember that person stopped me and say, "Hey, have you ever read this book?" Just off the cuff, didn't even know the guy, and it said Redemption, and I'm like, "Why are you showing me this?" I'm thinking in my head, and it's just those little messages where he kept putting people in my life, trying to push me towards the light. And um that whole like, going back to that gratitude, I'm very blessed to be where I am today. And just being out of that old life is, man, it's a blessing. It really is.
It sure is. But you listened to those signs and those clues that God was giving you. So you're fortunate in that sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there, looking back on it, in those times of because as we're talking, somebody could be stumbling upon this podcast and going through that same thing, right? That's my hopes, my hopes is that this can reach somebody that's in that struggle and go, oh shit, somebody's gone through that too. Because sometimes when we get in those the drinking sprees or the using sprees, we get to this state of isolation, right? And we think we're so alone, and it often leads to either suicide or even more drug use, right? Or putting us or harming somebody else. And my hopes for this is just to get it out there, and hopefully it can reach somebody in a bad way, right? And it could actually spark something in someone, because that's what happened for me.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend who got sober a little while before I did, but uh, after we were both sober, we couldn't use the word drunk without adding the words and stupid. I was just drunk and stupid. And that holds true for all these addictions. But you need to know that it is possible to get out of that life. There are two examples that you're listening to at this moment.
Absolutely. Well, all right. I think we'll wrap this up because we're reaching around that time. I do want to do a recap for people that so if you're following along with us, this is the weekly intention. Basically, the spiritual principle is just try to work patience in your life this week. Don't be afraid to jump in the comments and leave them down below, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Spotify or Apple Music. We'll have it up on Amazon here shortly, Amazon Music. But yeah, don't be shy. Maybe give us a suggestion about what spiritual principle we can, you know, do next, and also how these are working in your life. Yeah, don't be shy if you feel inclined. We'd love to hear from you. I just want to say thank you, Gary, for showing up and doing this with me.
Well, you're more than welcome. It's a wonderful endeavor that you're undertaking, and I'm sure that it will and has done good.
Yep, I appreciate that. Again, this is F.D. Recovery. Thank you guys for listening. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.